Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the South-afrifur podcast. You're listening to myself, Ivik Wolf, and today we have a very special guest joining us this evening in Khaki, fuck, see?
Just Khaki. Yeah, thank you. Hi. Good morning. Good evening. That's the
Good
one.
evening. Yeah, well, for some people it could be morning.
Yeah, it's 9 o'clock somewhere.
Yeah, it is. Huh. Right, so, and
Sorry, I didn't mean
obviously,
to just dump a
no,
philosophical truth bomb
this is
on you. And
exactly how everything starts.
yeah, like in past phases of my furry career, I've gone by Alex Vance. I like Khaki now. I'm at Khaki Doggy on Twitter.
Yeah, and obviously our co-host, Scratch.
Yep.
You never get forgotten, just delayed. Right. So, Kaki, maybe just tell us a little bit about your career. I mean, it's been decades.
It has been a few. I mean, uh, 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 um, yeah, I would like to. It would be great to talk about a career. The question actually caught me a little bit off guard because I've done a few different things in the
Mhm.
in the in the fandom, as this may be familiar to some people who are like into creative stuff in the fandom. Like, it can be a real it can be really useful to identify as a particular like creative outlet. Like, I am a writer, I am a dancer,
Yeah.
and especially when you're like, yeah, a young person or a little like figuring out your identity. Like, that's a great way to start. And I think for a while I was a writer, and then I think I was probably an editor and a publisher for a while. I contributed to the Wild West days of furry publishing, and I sort of fell out of the habit and out of love, and I got into photography and voice acting as well. So it's been tremendous fun
Mm.
in this zany little community of ours.
All right. And I mean, like with all of the, what's the word? With all of those sort of, what do you call them? Fingers in various different kinds of pie. Like, is there any one of them that you're currently finding to be your favorite thing to do?
Well, like today, that's definitely like the voice acting thing.
Yeah.
I've done that in the past as well. I did story readings for a podcast that I helped Skip Reddertail and Toonses set up, called the Bad Dog Book Club,
Hmm.
a few years ago. That's sadly not no longer on the air, but it was kind of a cool like furry literary review show where every other week, like one week there would be the episode would be a story reading. And
Hmm.
I contributed a bunch of those because I like reading stories. And then the next week would be the two hosts discussing the story and examining it from a literary point of view. And sometimes it was porn. Porn's great. Porn's a
Hmm.
lot of fun to read as well. And so I've done a few, like I played a role on a podcast called the Furry Basketball Association by Buck Hopper, who goes by Carrizo these days, which was, it was so good. It was like a sports radio program for an imaginary furry basketball league.
Hmm.
And I got to play this foul-mouthed British ermine called John Stoat with a chip on his shoulder.
Mhm.
And so most recently,
Was
with the
there you
sorry.
go. No, it's cool. I was just about to say something about a chip, but carry on.
Okay. No, I'm curious now. What's with the chip?
No, it's fine.
Okay, I'm sorry. And most recently, like, obviously the Corona crisis has everybody locked up, and like I took that very seriously early on, and so working from home and realizing, like, I do realize that I'm in a position of privilege, right? Like, my employment isn't threatened, and I'm doing sort of okay, and a lot of people aren't, and a lot of people, like, they're worried, and even if they're not, like, even if they're okay as well, they can still be like super anxious and like missing their friends, and so I really wanted to see if I can make something, because that's always how I like to cope with things, just make stuff and give stuff. And I started doing this thing that I'm super into. It's called The Voice of Dog, and
Hmm.
it's a podcast where every day I read a new upbeat furry story from some amazing writers have been sending in stories. So yeah, it's been going for almost a month. I've got like most of the rest of April already recorded. It's a huge amount of work, but it's so much fun.
Yeah, I could imagine. Like, I mean, and when it comes to things like, I guess readings and everything like that, do you? Because I know that what was the word? As a kid, like when it came to people who were narrating books back in the day, obviously,
Mm.
when you were listening to narrated books, it was mostly done for children rather than for adults. Nowadays, it's moved towards both adult reading as well as for kids. And
Yeah.
with say kids, for instance, you'd obviously have to put on voices and have to sort of, I don't know, spice up what you've got to sort of work on. But nowadays you can, drop into, man, who's the guy? He he does a reading all the time.
Mm.
Stephen Fry.
No, the other one.
um, Jim
The
Dale.
No,
the other one. The one
go
other
the fuck to
person.
sleep.
Oh,
Yes.
Samuel L. Jackson.
Samuel L. Jackson.
That was the one you're heading to. Like,
No, not Stephen Fry. The other one. Oh yeah, Samuel L. Jackson.
not
That's right.
not. What was the black guy in the Avengers? He
Yeah.
also reads books to kids to tell them to go the fuck to sleep.
Yeah, that's right. And just fucking eat. Oh, my favorite one of that book was Werner Herzog, the bizarre German documentary filmmaker. Like he did a version. He's got this nihilistic voice where he talks about and go to sleep because in sleep the realm of dreams is where we truly confront the eternal, and the tiger dreams only of death.
Wow.
Oh, you should see some of his documentaries. He talks about like albino crocodiles. It's wild. But yeah, so
Yeah.
I get what you're talking about because I've gotten really into audiobooks as well myself. I didn't read much for far too many years, and I found myself like doing a lot of walking, trying to to be a responsible grey muzzle and try and lose some of the weight that I'd gained after quitting smoking and stuff like that. And I had my headphones in a lot of the time. I was listening to podcasts, and I realized I can also nourish my mind and listen to audiobooks. And I discovered this fantastic world of literature being fed into your ears. And what you said about how some of them do voices, like there seem to be two real schools of thought there, where some people like try to do character voices, and some people, even those who can, choose not to, so
Yeah.
that you as a listener, can fill it in yourself. I'm very much the first camp. Like I like to do the voices. I think they're really fun.
Yeah, but that also probably harkens back to the idea of, being a kid, for instance, when your parents used to be able to do that whole voice thing. I know that we had there was a whole bunch of years back, we had a babysitter who would attempt to always, like, if there was a female character, be the person who was reading male or not, they would always attempt to, emulate the person, emulate their, and they were
Yeah.
so good at what they were doing. I'd be enthralled at what they were sort of talking about. So there's always that. But
Yeah.
I guess different strokes.
Yeah, I guess it's what a particular reader prefers, but it's also the choice that the narrator gets to make.
Mm.
Some of the narrators that I really like, I like a man called Peter Kenny, and he's an actor out in Britain, and he did the Ian Banks's culture novels, the science fiction novels from the Scottish writer Ian M. Banks, and he does the most fantastic, like very very specific character accent voices, because that's the thing when you're doing an accent, right? Like there is no such thing as a British accent or an American accent or even an Afrikaans a South African accent. Like there is a Joburg accent, and there is a New Jersey accent, and there's a Sheffield accent.
Yeah.
And
Mm.
successful mimics pick a particular one and emulate that one, rather than like trying to go like Pan American. Doesn't sound like anything to anyone.
Oh, what does Pan American even sound like?
Oh, I'm thinking now. Like there was the sort of Hollywood, like pre Second World War Hollywood had the idea of the transatlantic accent that would appeal to both Americans and Britons, and it was this curiously almost, imagine the Queen trying to do an American accent. Do you hear what I'm saying? So it has the
Yeah.
rolling rhotic R, and yet nevertheless, yeah, it was weird. But yeah, if you're not doing a specific one, then you can start talking with a New York accent. And you can sort of finish in a country twang, and the sentence makes no sense.
Yeah. I mean, like, what was it? Like, I tend to, weirdly enough, if I do, uh, I go sort of Midwest,
Hmm.
Valley, Valley girl, by the way,
I'm
Oh,
actually
dialect
that's
dependent.
yeah. What does that sound like? I'm super curious now.
I don't work well under pressure.
Oh, good. Well, you
Yeah.
were made for radio then, weren't you? Oh my God.
Oh
That's
my
how you
God.
start, right?
Yeah, it's
Yeah. Wonderful.
yeah, this is absolutely correct. There's reasons why I do radio. Of like anything live, I turn into a cherry tomato with a second.
You're
yeah.
It's
doing great. You both are. I'm so happy to be here with you because I think this is a great program. I've really enjoyed listening to your previous episodes. I only discovered you fairly recently when I think I saw the interview with Kyle Gold coming by, and like I'm not super into YouTube, so when I saw that, okay, it's 2 hours. Well, I'll get back to that eventually, and I never
Mhm.
did. But then I saw you doing one with Erkian
Mm.
out in Madagascar, and like I've I've been a friend and a fan of that chap for years now. So yeah, getting to hear his voice and getting to hear him talking to you was great.
I was, to be very fair, I think I first approached them last year, probably maybe even like a year and a half ago, because
Oh
there's
wow!
there's a channel that I sort of frequent, Polyglot channel, which I have learned absolutely no other languages. But I spend some time there, and they pop up quite often in a large amount of the conversation. And well, you're from Africa, and it's not South Africa. We need to,
Right.
and this conversation at some point needs to happen. I've approached, and then I chickened out, or we got busy somewhere, or something happened. Entire sort of back and forth, trying to figure out how to get them there. And when I finally sort of when we started moving towards the entire thing, they're like, "Oh no, well, I understand English. It's just
Oh
there's a
yeah.
language barrier there." And I was just sitting there going, like, "How bad could it be?" And like, it really is quite. It was interesting because
Yeah.
like they can understand, like you can understand a person quite well, but then the conversation is difficult to sort of build through the entire time. And I mean, we spent a large amount of time actually building into the conversation itself and figuring out which kinds of like ways that we can sort of make the connection between word and the next step the entire way through, which is actually really amazing. They're really really cool storytellers.
Yeah.
And it was interesting. It's an interesting sort of perspective, and being able to speak to so many different perspectives is one of the things that we enjoy quite often. I mean, it's literally part of our sort of tagline. Um,
Yeah. What is that again? What's
yeah, I
your
think
what?
it's literally a different perspective.
Oh, I
We're
like
really
that.
bad at that.
No, that's great.
But yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
I get what you mean about the like the language. I won't even say language barrier so much as fluency barrier
Mm,
because that yeah right because Erkian like
yeah, it,
great English is fantastic the
absolutely.
on Twitter indistinguishable from a native speaker and in many ways far preferable but uh in a no sorry that sounded mean I don't want to be mean to anyone some people just make really good tweets you just really enjoy those but I used to do voice acting panels at some cons and the format that I used that I borrowed from my buddy Buck Hopper Carizo who did amazing voice acting panels out in the States to get some people up get a pair of people up on in front of microphones and read a script and they'd each portray one of the characters in that script and I'd write like funny scripts for them to do and like all of those recordings together would sort of make a story and while this was always immense fun and got lots of people really excited to do it, a lot of people who normally like struggle with self-confidence, they felt safe in this environment where everyone's doing it to come up and like share that part of themselves. But then some of them would not speak English as a first language,
Mm.
and then that it's an extra hurdle in your energy where like you have to read a language that's not your own. You're seeing it for the first time, and you're just like one step on top of the other, and the result is like a you're not able to convey all the nuance that you want to express.
Mm. It's always that first reading that's more the like the understanding and the parsing, and then you can get back into it and start and start playing
Yeah.
into the character kind of thing.
So, I
Yeah.
mean, like, what was it? It was 2 years ago, at that convention,
Mm-hmm.
the our convention.
Yes, the one we run.
That one.
Oh, yeah?
But I was trying to read
SAFC. That's
Yes.
the one.
Yeah.
that one.
Oh, I was so tempted last year. It's just
Oh.
it's quite expensive the flights down there, but please don't let me interrupt. Yes, I'm a huge fan.
No, no, it was 2 years ago. Reading, man, names. Help me, Advolf.
Oh yeah, of course.
I was reading out of
Samuel L. Jackson. Sorry, that's going to be my go-to from now on.
No, I was reading one of Advolf's stories, because he actually approached me as like, look, I would really like you to read this, and I know that I botched the absolute crap out of it.
Oh no.
I do apologize to him, and I will always apologize to him about it. But the thing is that like it's little things like that where I think being able to do that and having the kind of training and patience to be able to read off of something without necessarily sounding practiced, which is part of I think like I think we spoke about this at one point in the lead up to this about the idea of how do you get to that mentality where you're just going to drop into a particular character or characteristic about something within that like sort of story, without necessarily having to think too much about it.
Oh, well, as soon as I figure that out, I'll let you know. Like, it sounds stupid, of course, but like mostly practice, practice, practice. I've found, especially doing like I've done 40 or 50 stories in the last few weeks, and none of them I've completely read beforehand. Right, so I'll scan through to make sure that there's nothing terribly like weird or upsetting or
Or illegible.
I'm trying to think of it. Yeah, no, that's actually a really good point. The only times that I have like completely read through was like, okay, there's typos in here, and there's some. This is me with my editor hat from years ago, and there's some like the wrong tense being used here, and that just trips me up when I'm reading. So you can give that a pass, and then I come back. But other than that, like I just like I drop in and start to speak like this, as if I'm really interested in what I'm reading, and trying not to read ahead to the rest of the sentence quite so much until I get to a sentence that has an exclamation mark, and then you sound excited, and then I encounter the first, the quotation mark from and now a character is going to speak, and like sometimes I just gamble. Like I can always edit it out later. I just gamble that oh howdy, she whispered. All right, cool. So that was the wrong voice. Oh, howdy, she whispered. Just do it again, and try not to get too embarrassed about it. I recently recorded one that's coming up later this month. It's called "To Catch a Thief" by Kyle Gold. Kyle Gold gave me stories to read. It was very cool of him. And this one was a huge challenge because it's basically a script, right? The story is 6 characters talking to each other in a room, and that was like a lot more because usually you've got like a few paragraphs of plot and then sometimes a character speaks, but having 6 characters in the same room all talking, and what was even like more like frustrating and confusing is that he chose a style where the person starts talking and only later after he's done the talking do you read who it was. So my lack of preparation really bit me in the ass trying to do that one because I kept just sort of gambling. Okay, well, this is probably going to be Maka. Oh, no, it was Richie. Okay, got to do it again.
That sounds very theater of the absurd.
I like that. Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Who knows? Maybe I'll live stream the recordings and people can just watch me fail. That'll be fun.
Well, I mean, what's it? I've actually seen, like, I tend to listen to creepypastas to get to bed. Um,
The opposite of what
so,
any normal human being does, but okay.
Yeah, I didn't want to put you on the spot, but yes, exactly.
but so generally, like, they put themselves out there. They don't do voices or anything like that, but I know that
Okay.
they tend to live stream when they're recording quite often, and that's sort of that entire same thing. Is that, like, if you're going to screw up, at least you're screwing up and it's funny, kind of thing. Like, it's really it especially for something like this. Like, it's interesting to see the process. It's interesting to see how you get from point A to point B. So, like, being able to, like, follow the entirety of the process itself. And I mean, obviously you've got a Patreon, and it's actually really easy to, I guess, put that up as, extra content where,
Huh.
s-
Yeah.
yeah. So, free advice.
No. Yeah. No, I've never done Patreon myself.
Huh? I thought you did.
No, not
You
me. Not
should.
me. A lot of people. No, I mean, okay, yeah. Not knocking anyone who does Patreon. Like, I think it's a fantastic model, but I think I'm too old fashioned. No, that's not the right thing. I just like to do stuff, man.
It's
Like,
about the process, right? It's about getting
yeah,
from A
yeah,
to B. It's about the finished product at the end of the day, right? I mean,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
it
It's
is, sorry, it is that, like, what, 2000 mentality of, like, where the
mm,
fandom was, where it was, like, you had a whole bunch of different, like, sites out there, and every single
oh
time,
yeah,
Kyle Gold was, I think it was on Giftstar, for instance.
yeah.
Um, so in other words, like, the stories that are making them famous now were available to practically anybody, and you would literally just, like, what was it? You would produce it chapter for chapter on places like that,
Oh yeah. That's what we did, man.
and that's
Like,
the
I was one of them in those days, and
yeah.
that's we. I don't think any of us could really imagine a model whereby you could
Make
make
money.
money
Yeah.
off that, other than like making books out of them eventually.
But that's where the entirety of the publisher sort of model came from, and it's one of the reasons you're obviously here now is because you at one point ran a publishing house.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, that's a it's a bit of an
Mm.
exaggeration on the one hand, like because it was just me, right? Just a dog on the internet with a computer, and able to run a website and a lot of communication and some good design skills for Adobe InDesign to be able to format a decent book and get the index right and get the administration to get some ISBNs and then finally get that printed through a print on demand service like Lulu or CreateSpace, which is, I mean, strictly speaking, anyone could have done it because it didn't cost a lot of money to do,
Mm.
just a lot of work. And, I mean, none of us slept a lot in our 20s, so you can do a whole bunch of work. Yeah, it sort of came about when I was a young furry writer and was very excited by all the positive feedback that I was getting on Yifstar. Yeah,
Mhm.
um, the Wild West days, as Carl Gold likes to talk about, and he was the example for my generation of furry writers. We were roughly the same age. There was KM Hirosaki,
Yeah.
Ryan Campbell,
Mhm.
then still known as, I think, Not Tube, and a bunch of others. But
Yeah.
we were all like, Carl Gold was like, he was the example because he had a novel out through Self Wolf Press. He had Vol. It was like 2005, I want to say, and that was, the rest of us had our eyes on that. Okay, so that's how we're gonna make this next step. Actually, furry books can get published. Now we're just gotta write a good one. And so I submitted my first story to a publication, also from Self Wolf, a magazine called Heat. They do
Yeah.
erotica and
Mhm.
artwork and poetry and that sort of thing. So I submitted a story to them. And the next day I hadn't heard back. And I was outraged. I could not believe that my story had not been like reviewed and accepted within 24 hours. And so I did the thing that all young writers do, which is to go, I'll just start my own anthology then. Fuck it. Yeah, no, it was really kind of a small-minded thing, but it was mostly from this idea. Like, I got so excited about the idea of this existing, right? That okay, so if someone's not going to do it for me right away, then maybe I can do it. Maybe I can do it myself. And there was a lot of it was. I mean that eventually wound up becoming Fang, which is now a continuing anthology every year, every other different editors. I think Carl Gold has edited the last one, or is still accepting it with the theme transitions.
Yeah.
But that was the idea. Like, what if it didn't have pictures? Like, very specifically, it doesn't have pictures because then it's cheaper. It's cheaper to print, and let's see what that looks like. And so I started calling myself a publishing house, which is this is the dog on the internet, but by calling yourself a publishing house and saying, okay, now I'm doing an erotic furry literature anthology, and like I spent a lot of time trying to like present this image of authenticity and authority, and trying to deceive. No, that's a fair thing to say. Trying to deceive writers into thinking, trick them into thinking that they had to line up and they had to like make it to the standards of Fang, even though Fang, if nobody sent in if I only got 10 stories, it would be a 10-story book, right? Beggars can't be choosers. But by this smoke and mirrors, convincing people that Fang was something like worth aspiring to, and you send in your best work and you polish it a bunch. I wound up getting fantastic stories from a bunch of wonderful authors, a lot of whom are still operating today. And the book did indeed become what I pretended that it was, which is a very good book of furry erotic fiction. The metaphor that I like to use for that is, do you know the story of the stone soup or axe soup?
Mm-hmm.
I think I know this, but tell it to the people who don't know.
Like,
so I know it as stone soup, and I think in Russian soup it's a time of famine, right? And this village is people don't have a lot of food, and so the market is shut because nobody's selling any of their food. All the farmers want to keep their vegetables for themselves. They don't have any to spare, and this soldier wanders into town, and he's homeless, and he nobody's opening their door to him. They can barely feed their own family, let alone feed some stranger. And so he realizes that he's not going to get any food from anyone. So in the middle of the village square, he takes out his knapsack, and he starts to build a fire, and he puts his pan on top of there, and in that pan, like, he draws water from the well. And everybody's sort of looking out their window like, what's this weirdo doing? Like, does he have food? Is he gonna put something in the pan where he's boiling this water? And then he takes this cloth wrapped thing out of his pack, and they're like, oh, does he have meat? Does he have what does he have? And what he has inside there is a lump of stone. It's just a stone, and he drops it into the soup pot. And he starts to stir it with great delight, and he's smelling the steam that comes out of it. You can see the delight on his face until eventually, like, the people are watching this and they're so curious. So the butcher comes out to this crazy person who's sniffing like boiled stone, asking, "Hey, what are you doing out there? What are you cooking there, buddy?" And he goes, "Oh, I'm making stone soup. I've never heard of that. Oh no, it's great. It's one of the finest meals you've ever had." And he's just so into this stone soup that the butcher starts to ask, "Well, I suppose if it's so good, could I maybe try some?" "Oh, well, it's not done yet, but yeah, sure. I'll be happy to share. Actually, now that you're here, do you know what goes great with stone soup? Stone soup with a little bit of meat in it. If you've got like a stock bone or something. So yeah, how about that? Like, if you, I'll be happy to make you a cup of stone soup. But if you've got like a ham hock or something for me to put in there, like, that would be even better. Then we can enjoy it together." So the butcher says, "Okay, well, it does sound like stone soup with ham would be even better." So he goes and gets a ham hock, and then the grocer becomes curious as well, and he goes, could I get a cup of this soup on this? Oh yeah, no problem, no problem. We've got a ham hock in there. Oh, actually, do you know what's even better? Like the best stone soup also has some carrots in it. Do you have some carrots to spare? And so it goes through the entire village, and everybody wants a share until eventually, like everybody's put something into the pot, and what you have, he calls it stone soup, but it's like village leftovers soup. It's just goulash. If
Yeah.
everybody contributes, everybody has more.
Hmm.
But you've got to have some liar deceiving people into thinking that there was something there to begin with.
Sure.
Yeah. I wouldn't call it a liar.
No,
It's
right?
it's not someone deceiving anyone into thinking that it's like this is gonna be the best thing as it is, but it's someone to get the ball rolling. It's the bard that spins the tale more so than like a liar swindling people out of something. I think.
No, exactly, because there's no self-interest.
Yeah.
Almost very few of us made any money in furry fiction. Lord knows not for lack of trying. That's very tough.
Yeah. I mean, and nowadays with so many publishing there already, and
Oh yeah.
like so many, what's the word? So many different places that you can go to, either start becoming a writer or just trying to talk to a whole bunch of writers. It's actually relatively it's open to that kind of conversation, and it's something
Yeah.
that I mean, what's it? You're looking at the Writers Guild, which
Oh yeah.
is
Yeah.
yeah. So it's very very it's exciting times with respect to that. But then again, it's uh, as we might have spoken, it's about the idea that it's sort of almost part of you're still part of it in much of the sense that you're doing more sort of interview work and I guess readings and whatnot. But when you
Yeah.
were writing, what were the general feelings of like what you were attempting to do during that time moving up to now?
I'm gonna I'm gonna need to understand the question a little bit
Yes.
better.
So
Yeah.
when you sort of joined in and sort of started with all of the ventures that you'd gone into as a
Yeah.
writer, um, like what were your initial feelings around like Carl Gold and the writers of that time, and how has that changed from then to now?
Ooh. Okay. Yeah. I think what you're again what you're asking. Yeah. Okay. So the era that I really got into writing kind of explosively 2000, 2004, 2005 is when it sort of started. It started with I think NaNoWriMo. Do you know what that is? The National Novel Writing Month.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's a challenge to write a 50,000 word novel. Like no rules, nobody's checking it. It's a challenge to yourself, and it's huge. It's immensely popular.
November, right?
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
It's very international, despite the fact that it's called a national. It
None.
started out in Canada. Yeah,
Yeah.
I guess NaNoWriMo just doesn't have the same ring to it.
Yeah.
But so at the time, for myself, I was fairly innocent of our furry progenitors because the furry fandom and furry literature and comics they've had phases throughout the 90s, like zines, and even before that the 80s and I don't know necessarily if people identified as furry in the 70s, but there were already anthropomorphic appreciation zines in the 80s and 90s, and I didn't know much about those. So I looked around and I saw you had you had Vol, definitely. That was
Mm.
Carl Gold. You also had another one. It was like Iron Claw, Fang and Steel or something. Oh, this is going to kill me that I can't get it right. It was like a tabletop RPG setting, um, for which there were also like anthologies and novels edited by folks like Fred Patton. I think
Yeah,
was an editor on
yeah,
one of those. What a treasure that chap has been. So it was a period where what we now know as the furry literature world was really being invented, and again because the progenitors before that to my feeling, didn't really influence what we were doing so much. Like none of us were in zines and doing that sort of thing, or AMAs. What were they called? Yeah,
Ask me anything.
that's
Fascinating things, yeah.
Yeah.
that's what it means nowadays. But I
Mhm.
swear it used to be one of those things where you had a rotating editorship, and okay, so I'm going to blow your mind with how social media worked before the internet, and I swear it's called an AMA. So here's how it goes. We're a club of like 15 people, right? We're on different continents, and we're writing letters to each other. Hey,
Mhm.
that's how you do it,
Yeah.
and sharing those with each other. Now we want to share our stories. So I can make 15 copies of my story and send that to everyone, and they can send their messages back. But what would probably even be better is to sort of make stone soup out of it, right? So instead of me sending my stories to everyone, I go, okay, I'm going to make a zine for us today. So everybody send me your stories, and then when I get those in a week, I'm going to make a magazine out of that. I'm going to staple it together. I'm going to photocopy it 15 times, staple those together, and then I'm going to send all of you one of these copies.
Mhm.
So you had these associations. Oh, that's one of the words. AMA something. Oh, um, where in order to get one of these magazines, you had to be like a writer or an artist. You had to contribute something. You had to put something in the pot with a stone, and then you'd get one, and then you'd get to read everybody else's stories and see their comics and see their art. So, like obviously, the internet changed how that worked, um, and the biggest change was that you could receive one of these magazines, these stories without having to contribute yourself. So anyway, by the time that we were coming up in for 2005, um, those of us who treated furry fiction as something more than just stroke fiction, which is fine, and as more than um, self-satisfying fan fiction of our own OCs.
Mhm.
Like I remember I was really drawn in by K.M. Hirosaki's Blue Forest stories, which are for my modern sensibilities. I mean, they're pretty dark and pessimistic and nihilistic, but they're very urban, and they dealt with drugs and disease in a dramatic but contemporary and accessible way. Like there was this F gel. It was one of the notions. It's a very specific drug that is sort of a packet of gel. You squeeze it out onto your finger and you rub it into your ear because a lot of mammals have very thin membrane ears, and a lot of blood runs through it. And so that would be a vector to introduce something into your body. I thought, yeah, these ideas were so cool. So I started doing that as well, and a lot of people were essentially writing serial novels, as you said, on Yivstar. Yivstar was the place to
Mhm.
be. You had some other places. There's got Fox. There was the Villar Central Library, but none of them were as good for certainly erotic fiction
Yeah.
as Yivstar. I mean, some of them in some ways were better, had more writer facilities, but then they didn't have as many people listening, or they went without maintenance for months, and then no new stories were pasted.
Yeah. But yeah, I'm actually checking out Fangclone now. The anthropomorphic or modern lycanthropy apparent between 97
Well,
and 2006. Hello?
yeah. Fang and
Yeah.
Claw. Oh, is that what it's
Yeah.
called?
Fang,
Well,
Claw, and Steel. Yeah.
well,
Oh, Fang, Claw, and Steel.
there's
Yeah,
another one called Iron Claw, which is a Renaissance
Yeah.
fantasy RPG.
Yeah.
that's the one I'm thinking of. Yes, that is the one. Sorry, I mean, Fang Claw is great, but yes, Iron Claw, I think is I was thinking of.
Hmm.
First
Because
edition
yeah,
published 1999, second edition 2011.
yeah,
Wow.
yeah, and
1999 to
Fred
2011.
Patton's in there as well. Yeah, that's a pedigree, isn't it?
Sure. It's actually like, I mean, and the way that it's moved along. I mean, like I still remember what was it? Schwartz, for instance, with Sabrina Online
Oh yeah, wow.
back in the day.
Actually,
Yeah.
that's a good point. Those those
Hmm.
those comics were a really big deal. Like you had the Class Menagerie,
Oh, I
Yes,
love the
Class
Class
uh,
Menagerie.
Menagerie.
Absolutely love
right?
Menagerie.
Yeah.
Tiffany Tiger,
Yes.
the Suburban Jungle.
Free fall, not really
Free
furry,
fall.
but yeah,
Well,
spacey kind of.
still out there.
Close
It's
enough,
it's
yeah.
been it's still running. Free
Mm.
fall.
Oh, is it? Oh, that's
Yeah.
amazing.
Ozzy and Millie.
Ozzy and Millie, but that one did die out.
Yeah, Ozzy and Millie stopped.
Yeah.
Furpiled was one. Oh, you used to have a site. I wonder if it's still around.
The
The Belfry.
Belfry.
Yeah,
The
right.
It's still around, yeah.
There's this wonderful collection where you could just find these comics. Oh, um, are you old enough to know Buster Wilde?
Heard the name.
Yes, I've seen a few Buster Wild comics. I think.
Okay, I'm a huge fan of Buster Wilde. So like late 90s, say 90s, Fur Nation, and I was in university, right? And I didn't have like a reliable internet connection at home, and I was dial up, and that cost money. So I'd sneak into the computer lab at university before classes every morning, try and get a PC that that faced a wall, so I could maybe look at pictures with butts before anybody else came in. That's the things we did before we had our own computers, and then so Buster Wild is about a werewolf, Weer, and it's about a dude who is like a gruff homophobic accountant by day, and then by night he turns into a twinky gay werewolf that goes out on the party scene. It's fantastic. So I was a huge fan of this, and it's getting updated, and it was very sad. And then many years later, I eventually I hunted down the creator of that comic, a man called Scott Zellman, Scott with one T, and I gushed at him. I'd love to pretend that I was very professional, but no, I was a complete fangirl, and I just squeed at him, and I'm such a fan of Buster Wild, and he was so important to my a lot of my self discovery as a young gay dude, right? Because I didn't do the party scene so much, so it gave me a lot of insights that I didn't have before. And it's such a shame that the only way that anybody can get it is they go to fucking archive.org, pardon me
Yeah.
for swearing, and find the thumbnail-sized gifs of this comic that he hand inked, and he did the hand lettering, old school. And I talked him into making scans of his drawings and sending those to me so I could publish that for him. Like, and
Yeah.
now there's a book, and there's high resolution scans out there, and anybody who wants to see Buster Wild werewolf can do so, which is I'm so proud of that.
The Belfry still has a link to Buster Wild. Obviously, it's a dead link.
Oh
because
wow.
it links to Fur Nation.
Oh yeah, rest in peace.
Yeah.
Yeah, the first thing that popped up here is something called like OO cities, like some really
Oh
archived
yeah.
old ass, like looks like
Yeah.
GeoCities from back in the whenever.
Yeah.
Yeah, those are the right. But so sorry, that was me
No.
getting sidetracked by and super excited. Yeah, I guess the web comics um were very much they were their own thing. I don't think there was a lot of crossover between the folks who were doing these awesome web comics on the weekly or sometimes even like daily,
Yep.
and those of us writing. Well, I know that there were writers who partnered with artists to make um, essentially graphic novels that were being posted on the web, one page at a time,
Mm.
all unmonetized, of course, because we didn't have Patreon, we didn't have Kickstarter.
Yeah.
God,
mean-
Heathen City would have looked different if we had Kickstarter.
Sure. What was it? Look at Coyoteville, for instance. I'm not sure if you guys are familiar.
No, I'm gonna have to look that up.
Nope.
I think it was Coyoteville. It's so old school, like the way that it's been drawn. Like it's very. I can't remember.
Okay, webcomic by Stephen Graziano
Yeah.
on fatpandakc.com. Okay, cool.
Because and like what was it? This was pretty much like for me and Scratch, especially in our high school years. We did pretty much the exact same thing you were doing. It's just we were doing it in a high school setting rather than a what do you call it? a university setting.
Oh, so sneaking into the lab
No,
to
the labs would be open, and we would
yeah
actually we would wake up early. We would
yeah
be into school at around about, what was it, 6:45?
Early in the morning, yeah.
Yeah, it's quarter to
whoa
seven. Because the person who ran our computer labs always opened up very early so that people can do browsing and things like that in the morning.
right
And we snuck on there. We had two computers that we kind of both sat at the entire time. We actually, what was it, we browsed furry muck the entire time. Like, we were
oh
constantly
neat.
there. Yeah, it was back in that time as well. It was,
So how did you guys? Sorry, I'm going to reverse the interview because I'm super
uh,
curious about that. How did you discover that? Because you
scratch
mentioned
you.
that you were young, right?
I
Yeah.
I piggybacked all of my information from the early years of Vivek.
Was it me? How did I
Okay.
find out about furry muck?
Yes. How did you find
Way to
out?
throw
I
your
don't know.
buddy under the bus, by the way. Like, oh, I blame him.
No, I blame him for a lot of stuff, but yeah.
Jeez. How did I find it? Oh, yeah, I was looking for furry chats, and furry muck came up, and I was like, well,
I
this one
guess it
seems
would,
fine.
yeah.
And obviously, like, it had safe for work areas and things like that, so it was actually open and accessible to both of us. It's small, it's text based, it's literally just an IM,
Yeah.
but
Mm. You can
like
carry the client around on a floppy
yeah,
or a stiffy, sorry.
Yes. Yeah, that was a big one. It was IRC for me.
mm,
The first socializing with other furries after after discovering the porn.
yeah,
I'm not ashamed to admit that's how I fell into the fandom.
I think
I
that's what it
over
was.
and then I found I was hunting for whatever I had a werewolf face, so I was getting pretty
Yeah,
close.
same.
Right? And then I found K9. Do you know him? K-9,
Oh
Mr.
yeah,
K9
yeah,
on
yeah,
Twitter, Scott Fabianic, who would later do like circles. He was the artist for that,
yes.
and I
All right.
just
It's a
I
nostalgia
saw
trip.
this art and I was like, oh, what's that? That's for me. My ears perked up and I grew a tail, and then it was just a question of finding others like me. For Nation Talker, we were on IRC. Um, And yeah, no, exactly like you said. I get up early in the morning to talk to my friends in America,
Hmm,
and then much later discover that there were there's also furries in the Netherlands.
yeah,
Gosh, imagine that.
yeah. I think we had a conversation. Was it 2 interviews ago? We were talking about the differences between uh, the various kinds of furries that you can find. I mean, like, German furries are not like other European furries, and in as much as pretty much every.
Wow.
But that's
Okay.
exactly that was the entire conversation, that the people who were from the Netherlands weren't the same as the people who were from Germany, weren't the same as the people from any of the other parts of the country. It was
No, I get what you're saying. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
like and
Yeah,
it,
I like the term tribes for that.
yeah.
So in the past, I've described Eurofurence, the big convention in Germany, as a confluence of furry tribes. Because yeah, like the obviously like most of the attendees or the largest group of attendees are German, but like there will be the Russians, a large group of Russians hanging out and doing activities together,
Those
or the
Russian.
Ukrainians, or the Italians, which used to, I believe, like do their room parties mostly, and only in recent
Hmm.
years started coming out of the fire pit. But yeah, there are unique qualities. Like one of the things about Dutch furries that sort of sets them apart from other furries is how many of them use their actual IRL first names as their character names.
Hmm.
Interesting.
Yeah, I don't know anybody else who really does that. I didn't do it myself, but yeah, I know a Remco,
Hmm.
and that's his furry name, and Francie, and that's her furry name.
Hmm. Okay.
Yeah, it's just like some property of this little microcosm, this little subculture
Yeah.
that
So,
evolved that way.
I mean, we're talking about microcosms right now, but I mean, like, all of this stuff sort of builds up to the idea that you're obviously a professional photographer, gone to several different conventions, and I guess documented a whole bunch of this. How did you start like, did you do training for this, or did it just eventually come naturally where you were busy going like, okay, this is how you work with light. This is how.
Ah,
Yeah.
see that the latter very much. So I've always been a voracious autodidact.
Hmm.
Learn by doing.
Hmm.
Which is not the best way to learn things, but it objectively, but it has worked. You get to satisfy your curiosity and get into the new project energy and use that for learning. So I found it quite. So oh shit, no, I can tell you exactly when it happened.
Hmm.
Um, March 2010. I was working for a company where my commute took me through Schiphol Airport, this Amsterdam airport, and Schiphol Airport has a the part where it's a train station has a big glass wall facing outside, so it's huge, huge. And I noticed on this day, pardon me, in March 2010, I noticed that it looked different than it had before, and I couldn't quite figure out like why, but I was just captivated by it because the light was like sunlight was streaming in through those windows, which it doesn't normally do at 6 p.m. because there's other buildings around and the precession of the sun means that it's elsewhere. But I eventually I realized like the sun is coming in real low and it's shining and it's just blazing through the glass, and everybody who walks past it, nobody's looking at it, and they're casting these incredible shadows. So if I kneel down here, then all these people passing me, like the sun is behind their heads and making these halos. Grab my phone, a shitty little iPhone by today's standards, not a very advanced piece of technology at the time, and I started taking pictures of people. Because I was so interested in these shadows that they were casting, and the security guard eventually came up to me and said, "Sir, what are you doing there?" I'm like, "Oh yeah, I'm just being a nerd and I'm taking pictures because the shadows are so cool." I was like, "Okay, well, have fun being a nerd, weirdo. Goodbye." And I spent an hour there, and that was the first time that I became really aware what light does. That it makes things amazing and creates depth in space. And yeah, that's where I started. And then I started saving up for my first big boy camera, and I eventually like wind up getting a loan out to get some serious equipment for to do weddings professionally and internationally.
Hmm.
Like nowadays, I look back at that and I regret how much money I spent on, so much money on bodies and lenses and this and that. Oh, now I know you don't need that. Now I've sold all of it. I've just got this one camera, and I can do almost like all of my favorite photos are with this particular focal length, about 35 millimeters. Yeah, let's say 80%. And
Okay.
okay, so you don't zoom, but you can just walk closer. And hey, when you're closer, then you can have fun with the people that you're photographing as well. And that happens to be what I like. I like people. I like people doing people things. So weddings are great because people are happy, and cons are great because people get to like be silly animal people with their friends, and they get to be together, and there's elation and joy in that
Hmm.
I do not tire of capturing.
So I actually want to talk about, like, obviously, you've worked with a fandom for many years.
I've
The
danced with the animal people, yeah.
Yes, you have, but like the evolution from, again, from the days of the 90s to the 2000s, the idea that I guess the 90s and the 2000s were, irrespective of how many times we actively denied uh, that it was heavily, I guess, sex focused or sex centric.
Yeah.
Um,
Okay. Yeah.
like the evolution between then and now. How did you experience?
Um. Obviously, I've given that a lot of thought as my sensibility have changed, and I've been exposed to ideas and identities that I didn't previously consider. Like the a lot of us came out of the 90s. Yeah, the 90s dealt with the sort of smugness of the 70s, and slightly the 80s by confronting, reality is messy, and there and things are not perfect. We sort of imagined that previous generations had tried to deny a lot of realities, whether gay people exist, whether whether black people should have political power, whether women should be employed, and just sort of denied those, which is fucking absurd. And in the 90s were about recognizing that absurdity and mocking it. That's that gave power, but that wasn't the same as actually like examining what those realities meant to people or how it could be better. South Park's a great example of that. South Park, their idea of equality was mocking everything equally,
Mm.
and to a 90s kid that seems fair. Everyone gets mocked equally,
Yeah.
but it's not really fair. Like fair is not heaping the same kind of um, aiming mockery at someone or at a group of people like gay people, like poor people, like immigrants, whatever, who
Yeah.
experience mockery as part of their daily life, and this time as a joke. Well, those groups of people are often told that the mockery that they receive was a joke and they shouldn't take it so seriously.
Yeah.
That's a very different experience than leveling that at a group who is a white Christian, politically enfranchised, um, uh, who don't experience that at the same time. So that was I'm giving that as preamble, because then like the early 2000s, where I started really paying attention to the fandom. Sex was a big part of it, absolutely. But I think mostly as a function of the age group that most of us were in, because like the fandom is very much an internet thing. It has antecedents before that. It has the zines and the AMAs that I talked about. But the fandom as we know it emerged from the internet. That's where most furries discover the community. Not just being into animal people, but the community. And so, in order to be on the internet in 1999, you kind of had to be a late, an 18 to 26-year-old at with higher education, because then you'd have access to computers,
Yeah.
and some affinity with computers, and a willing, and a bit of social isolation, and maybe be into weird stuff. Oh yeah, and you probably had to like porn, because that was generally the way that people, or that a lot of people discovered it. I won't say generally, but I certainly did, and I know a lot of people who did. So those factors together meant that the people who were making up a large part of the active furry fandom in the early 2000s were a diverse and yet also quite homogenous groups, mostly dudes, a lot of
Yeah.
gay dudes, a lot of people between 18 and 26, generally over 18, at least. Like under 18s were rare. I think I was one of them, because I was a young student. I was like 17 when I started university, so I just barely got in there when age was still an issue. Sorry, that's not even right. But I think I was under 18 when I discovered it
Mm-hmm.
by a few weeks, right? And so I think that the prevalence of, or the dominance of sex as, or the concept of sex, I should even say, like I don't know if there was a lot of banging going on in the furry community. I was way too innocent and dumb to notice it in the furry communities, the real life communities that I was in.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but that group was homogenous in a way that hot-blooded 20-something, socially a little bit awkward but somewhat creative, into porn, a lot of gay folks suddenly in a community where there's, the percentage of potential, like-minded folks. I wouldn't even say potential partners, but you know, you meet a lot of other gay dudes as a gay dude in the fandom.
Yeah.
Certainly back then. And I think the evolution that has happened is not so much a change in the fandom as a whole, but more, yeah, stone soup again, more being added. It
Yeah.
used to be just sausage, right? The stone soup of the furry fandom was a sausage soup in the early 2000s. And I'm I'm not going to say other ingredients now, but yeah, more was new age groups and cultures, and obviously women have always been a huge part of the fandom, and they but yeah, the age groups and the increased diversity. Like sex is still there. You look at a
Mm-hmm.
con, you have a whole bunch of young people, very excited to be together, to be away from structures of authority. Yeah, they're going to sneak up into the room and have fun together. Like that's fine if you're into that. And I especially like, this is the one thing that I think is a huge change, um, the prevalence of talking about consent, and identity and personal dignity, because that was always, it was always kind of assumed as part of, yes, we are in our 20s, we are now mature, yes, we understand the world far better than our parents did. Our parents never had sex, they don't know about sex, we do. um
Well, you
but
know what?
now the
Hmm?
sorry.
Yeah, no, that was go.
Oh yeah, but now because there is a diversity age groups and strategies, professional furry Twitter, Doc Wolverine and Uzi Badger and their whole generation who have who take a sort of didactic role. Moms of furries also,
Yeah.
um, who are like very conscious there are young furries out there and they're in the same mix as everyone else, and they're seeing everything that everyone's doing. They can be exposed to everything that everyone's doing, which includes the porn, which is fine. You got to learn to filter that out if that's not your thing.
It, mhm.
But
It's
there should be certain
yeah,
things need to be said, and
yeah.
because adults assume that it's part of being adult and responsible, but they should be said. We should talk about consent, about identity, about trans rights. Like they should be
Mm.
spoken out. Sorry, that was a bit of a speech there.
No,
No.
no. I think that's. I mean, like I'm while you're talking about this, I'm actually looking through the gallery, Cologne Pride, for instance. Um, and it's
Oh yeah. Oh,
yeah. When
sorry.
was it?
Yeah.
2016, 2017?
Yep. Yep. I went out there with my buddy Kenai.
Yeah.
And he'd been to Cologne Pride before, and he knew a bunch of furries out in Cologne. It's a fantastic bunch out there.
Mm.
And I got to see the Cologne Pride Parade, which, like, the only Pride Parade I knew previously was in Amsterdam, and we have floats, and those floats float because it's canal Pride. It's on the canal, so
Oh.
it's so much fun. So you crowd around the quayside, and you watch these boats coming by, and like one of my fondest memories, one of my proudest memories as a Dutch person, was that I was standing next to some granny who was much shorter than I was. So I shuffled aside to give her some space, and she turns around and she picks up this child. She picks up her grandson, and puts him on her shoulders so that he can wave at the drag queens that were
Mhm.
that were coming by, and they can shoot some confetti at him. And that was I was so proud to see that.
Yeah.
So yeah, in Cologne, it's at ground level, and they walk past, and there's people scantily clad, and the sort of kink scene represented as well.
Hmm.
And they march proudly, and puppies and ponies and leather daddies. It's great.
Hmm. I mean, and like it's like it man, words, use them. It's very close to the same way that we think about like the furry scene, and the fact that because it's so niche, you're allowed to be almost as far to the corner as you possibly can be. That there's almost an acceptance that it exists. And I know that if you're on Twitter for any amount of time and have
Mhm.
scrolled past anything that normally like catches your interest, and you get past the, I guess, the things that Twitter thinks that you want to see, you
The
start,
algorithm.
yeah, the algorithm's a weird thing. But
Hmm.
like, and then you start getting into like that other part of the scene. You have people who are constantly, and I mean, I'm going to call it arguing, but very much of it has to do with this idea that like at least people are beginning to find a way to express themselves on a medium that, to as much as it sometimes does, doesn't necessarily do as much harm as as it thinks it does. If you know what I'm saying.
I wonder if you could like bring it.
Mm.
Not necessarily specifics. I'm not asking. I don't think we should be talking about specific examples.
Yeah.
But like, what sort of experience are you talking about?
So if we're looking at the idea of call out culture, for instance, some people call it
Okay.
call out culture,
Yeah.
but it's particularly because of the way that it's put out there. It's this entire idea of, this person has done this thing. Let's all dog pile and not have a conversation around why or how this
Yeah.
happens. It's just you have 500 people suddenly like hitting your DMs or whatever the hell it is and going like, you're terrible, you're this, you're that. There's no more conversation around why or how something is happening. People get called out for it and then they get like pretty much canceled. But for some reason, dependent on the person that you're talking about, within 2 or 3 months, they're back with the same following. And
Yeah.
it's weird because that means that there's no repercussion. There's no learning experience. There's nothing that's happening. And I think that within, if we're looking at, say, the 90s, the 2000s, say, 2010, the way up until, say, almost now.
Yeah. Okay.
There's a way that, like, I think the and maybe most people would be able to sort of back this up. The amount of time that we spent within the fandom, like, now more than ever, especially in the past, I'm going to say 3 to 4 years, repercussion does not necessarily, it doesn't have the same kind of weight, if you understand what I'm saying. Like back then, it was career ending.
Well, I don't remember it happening much. I don't like there was a lot more. Okay, I'm gonna use the word. It was much more like permissive, turning a blind eye. Like, yeah. So what I was talking about, the idea that we're accepting and we're so broad-minded and we're accepting of each other, and we sort of like chose not to notice some shitty behavior, right? Because we don't just be talking online and we just not confront and acknowledge that about certain people and really not think about it. You know, I've looked back at people that I've known from way back when, whose behavior has now shown them to be not cool people with whom I definitely now prefer not to associate or. But that back then I should have noticed as well.
Yeah.
We just didn't do that. Like if you don't like someone, then you don't talk to him, and that's that. Like I mean, I have trouble talking about. I don't even like the word call out culture because that's sort of suggesting as if call outs themselves are an activity that certain people do, which I definitely know is for some people true. But that's part of outrage, and outrage is much older than the internet. Like outrage culture has like outrage used to be fueled by gossip, and then it was fueled by tabloids, and then it was fueled by rumors and fulfilling this desire to be angry about someone. Fucking witch burnings, witch trials way back when. The witch hunt is still used as a metaphor for that. But so yes, in the dark heart of the human animal, there is a desire to vilify, right? This is where most inequality and discrimination comes from as well. Like you get a group of people, these group of people, I can just hate them and I can bully them and I can be mean to them and it's fine, and then it's a bonding experience with the rest of us. Oh great, I want to do that because I just love doing this activity anyway. And so that I believe definitely still exists, and it, as it so often does, like tabloids like to masquerade as news, and people who embrace this outrage like to masquerade as proponents of justice and fairness. But that doesn't mean that there are people out there who like victims of certain types of crimes or even very very bad behavior, being honest about their experiences for the protection of others.
Yeah.
Like that's a real thing as well, and that is a thing that can result in outrage, because there is also such a thing as outrageous behavior. But I struggle to talk about this because I feel this as a principle. I have chosen not to participate in that in so much as I have like a public persona on my Twitter. Like I've given a lot of thought to this. Do I want to contribute to spreading this awareness about bad actors, with the risk that maybe it turns out to have been unfounded, or there was more nuance, or I didn't, And I've decided, no, I consider it important, but I don't. For me, I don't want to do that. Me as Khaki, as a person, that's not what I want to do. And like, I I know that I'm then not contributing in this way that is important. The didactic influence and confronting it. I'm not contributing to that. I know that. So I can contribute in other ways. Like
Yeah.
I want to contribute positivity. I want to encourage good behavior, and I leave the critique of bad behavior to those who are more capable of it and more informed than I am, and can pay more attention to it, because I don't spend a whole lot of time on the internet. And so when I do it, when I go on Twitter, most of the time it's just scrolling through and hitting the like button on a whole bunch of tweets, and just letting people know that I'm thinking of them, and that what they're doing is really cool. And I like to build up,
Yeah.
and that's yeah.
I mean, and
Uh,
with respect to your career in respect to like building up. I mean, we're talking about the fact that like what was it? You ran and helped run several different kinds of podcasts, several different kinds of ways of interacting with
yeah,
one another, and
yeah,
it's something that I think we desperately need more of. I know that like of the longer running, like not long running, but I mean like an hour and a half, for instance, you don't find people doing hour and a half long podcasts, for instance, maybe even two
yeah,
hours, because it's not listened to often enough. We don't necessarily like we pretty much just talk shit the entire time. The thing is that it's about talking shit with people who matter, you know?
yeah. For various definitions of matter.
Matter, yeah.
Like, I've seen the guest selection that you have. Like, I know that there have been attempts of podcasts with these kind of interviews before, where like the people who were picked based on popularity, the book sales, fame. A lot of the same reasons that some guests of honor are picked.
Mhm.
But I really appreciate that you podcasts like this one, that go out of their way to find people of interest, who can be anyone, who can have two-digit Twitter followings. Can you imagine? That's a nobody by those metrics. But of course not. This can be an incredibly interesting person with a really unique viewpoint. That's
Mhm.
that's that's so important to share. That can be a delight to talk to for
Yeah.
an hour or two,
I mean,
as you like to do with your guests.
yeah, and it's the thing is that, and it's what an hour or two actually gives you, that ability to just randomly talk. It's not necessarily about always following a script, because following scripts is boring. At least for us, it might.
You're
Because
talking to a former writer, right? I think
yeah,
scripts can actually be really
no,
interesting if you read them. I mean,
it's I. It's about being wooden at times. Like I mean, we've done script following before, maybe on two or three or four of occasions, and the podcast goes by within like 45 minutes, and then you're out of question. But I had like 50 of them. You've gone through all of them
right.
because so it just depends on what you want out of your conversation. So for instance, for you come with this wealth of absolute like understanding of like a decade's worth of working alongside um like some of the like actors that we both myself and Scratch have like come to know and understand and read and sort of interacted with either directly or indirectly.
Hmm.
And that's something that you it stands to reason that you are in the position that you're in, the ability to have that kind of comment, be able to stand up and say, I want to work on this project, and just making it happen because you enjoy doing it.
Hmm.
the people who
Yeah.
the people who know you will follow your thing is that every single time you're creating something interesting, something that maybe it has a different spin to it, and because of your wealth of experience through what you've done so far, um, it's just fresh, irrespective of how long
Oh,
you've been in the
thank you.
fandom. Like and those are things that we want to appreciate. That like it's always something new. I mean, like who would have thought that like it I was sitting here going like when I heard about the project with where you're doing like readings, I was like, I thought we did that already somehow with furry fandom. Lo and behold, you're like one of the first people who's actively gone out of their way to do it.
Yeah. I'm trying to think. There were a few others.
Mm.
I think Will Sanborn
Mm-hmm.
did. What was it? Anthro Dreams, where he got people doing. Yeah. So
I
I
know
mean, thank
Tempo's
you.
working on something. Maybe? I don't know.
I know a few people like have reached out. Oh, okay. No, I'm not gonna come up with a name, but I know there was an idea to do a furry horror
Ooh.
anthology podcast or stories. Um, I know that one of my friends out in Finland, Supi, is now doing readings of one of Rukis's books with his absolutely delightful accent. He has a wonderful command of English, as so many Finnish people do. He has a very sexy voice. I love to listen to it, and I hope that more people do. I hope people like just do it. We've got phones. They've got microphones. You can just go and do it. It's
Mm.
and then you can learn to be better, which is also really cool. And then it'll make you a better public speaker, which is
Mm-hmm.
a useful skill to have.
I mean, and you know what's it? There's a Anthro Film Society that's starting up now. As
Oh yeah.
yeah, I think it's actually starting in Europe. It's the same people who've been doing like all of those music videos. Um, man, you literally
Easy
have
Wolf, you mean?
yes, Easy Wolf.
Oh, I had no idea he was up to that. That's so cool.
I think it's Easy Wolf. They're either connected somehow, but the thing is that I mean, music putting out there. Of course, the next step is to move into actual filmmaking. Like it's
Well, there was an example of that with Bitter Lake,
yeah,
by Shay and Easy Wolf and a
yeah.
fantastic crew out there.
Then there's the what's it? Scratch. We had them on a for an interview
Oh,
for the
the furry horror movie thing.
yes.
Yeah, I forgot what the name
Oh,
was.
yeah, I think I've heard about that. It's got a female lead,
Yeah,
and it's named for her, isn't it?
I think no. Furry horror. It's a slasher flick.
Yeah.
Like they actually haven't updated in a while. Last time I checked, like I remember, like
Oh,
I
here's hoping they're
guess
just hard at work,
yeah, yeah.
and that the fucking Fang and Claw killer didn't get the production team by leaping out of the celluloid.
But it's little things like that. So these projects, yes, maybe we're going to be able to sit back and listen to something like word, all the single furries, again.
Hey,
Like yeah,
hey,
I'm getting
I
it.
tell you what, celebrate all the single furries. I I know I know what it looks like. I know I had that same feeling the first time that I and heard it, and then I watched it again and
Yeah,
again, and I looked at these people and s-
they're enjoying
everybody
themselves.
tried. Sorry,
They're
yeah,
enjoying
yeah,
themselves.
they're enjoying themselves and they're trying to make something fun. Like, I talked to or I heard a Rhubarb talking about it. Rhubarb, the bear, he did the vocals.
Mm-hmm.
Um, he did not know that those vocals were going to be used. He was putting that down as a temp track. That's why he's got this nasal voice, because it was in a key where it would have to be in a higher voice. And they figured that you know they'd get some female furry singer who can actually like do this role. You know, someone like Lily Pad would be a great one, right? She's a
Yeah.
fantastic singer. Maybe we're gonna get her. And then he was astonished. Oh shit! They took my dorky, jokey. Uh, uh, Weird Al impersonation, and they used it, and they're showing that to people. And no wonder they think it's bad. But he's not ashamed of it. Like he made this for his friends who were making this cool project. Okay, I'll contribute to that. I'm gonna record it like this, and like the music's okay, and the cinematography is great, and the choreography. I can't dance like that. That's awesome. So yeah,
beyond
I'm
it,
kind of annoying in my enthusiasm. Sorry.
No, there's also the Canadian. What was it? You can prance if you want to.
Oh, I don't know that one. That sounds like my jam.
Yeah, it's literally they take you can dance if you want, but they changed it to I think it was Equinox. They had
Oh,
like
that's so cool.
yeah, and it was
Oh my god, the safety prance.
the
I'm
safety
seeing that as
prance,
well.
Yeah.
First without suits. Oh, that's so good.
It's actually really well
That's
done.
really
Like,
cool.
out of there was a point that I think Scratch and I were literally just I know I was downloading a whole bunch of these things off of YouTube. Like maybe they're going to get like thrown away, but like those are the kinds of things, and I agree about the fact that like yes, all the single furries is something that I think people should at this point play when everybody's drunk, so that everybody can
Yeah.
just sit down and enjoy it.
Yeah. And you know what? Next time that somebody does it, I will sing along to it. I don't remember the lyrics, but I guess it probably doesn't really that matter. And I'm just a no. I do remember some of the lyrics because the lyrics were also like not great because it's not Shay's first language. Like I'm just a pup. I
Yeah.
can't even stop. That doesn't rhyme, Shay. But it doesn't matter because it's fun. Yes. Okay. So it left a bigger impact than even I thought. But okay, I want to actually swing back to. Sorry for leading my own interview
Go
here,
for it.
because one of the things that you like, I appreciate your compliment for the various things that I've done and that I was able to get people to contribute. That's not. That's not. It's not just because I have because I've done all these various things. It's not. It's not that gave me. Oh, what's the word? Like clouds? No, not clouds. Cred. That's kind of secondary. So the bigger reason that I can decide on one of these projects, I'm hugely simplifying, of course, but and that I need other people to help with, and then I can get people to help is not because I have attained a status whereby I can make a proclamation and expect knights to rally to my service. No, I have friends from from when we were coming up in as writers, as photographers, as con goers. I just have specifically peers is what I want to talk about. There's a comic artist, a fantastic artist called Brian Root. Roots works on Twitter. He's a wonderful person. He does the Dawn Chapel, the web comic, famous for the little comic about Firefox and this little fox in the computer eating all the cookies.
Yeah,
Like
yeah, yeah.
that's the one. So he talked about um, a phenomenon whereby young upcoming furry artists feel rejected by these cliques of artists that they feel they should be able to belong to because they've reached a point. I have this many followers. My art is of this quality. I should be admitted into this VIP club. But instead, these cliquey harridans are keeping me out for political reasons because I'm not part of their clique. And he sort of held this very much more articulate screed than I can do about it. Like those cliques, they're not like politically motivated. Maybe they can be, but most of the time they are groups of friends who came up together. Like they all started with, around the time that they were each other's first followers on FA, right?
Yeah.
They were each other's first watchers, and they encouraged each other when they all sucked and they were all excited about getting better, and they came up together, and so they have the shared frame of reference of their exact like experience in improving their skill and attaining more attention and trying to monetize if that's what they were into. And so of course like those are those are the people that they want to surround themselves with. Not necessarily like great artists of a certain quality. It just happens that a lot of the people in these groups wound up following the same path because they inspired each other, or writers for that matter. So those aren't like pantheons of people who've attained a certain status. No, they were friends, and they were doing the same thing. And that's a lot of what I feel incredibly blessed by, having been able to do these projects. Everyone that I've worked with has always prioritized positive relationships, even more important than a good product. Like we all wanted to make good things, comics, books, podcasts, whatever. But it was even more important to remain friends and be kind to each other and treat each other with dignity and respect and generosity. Because then, even if the project fails or if it's no good, you have a friend who has research. And so when people knock on my door or ask, can you voice this, or do you want to do some photos for me at a con? Yes, all of it. Yes, I absolutely want to do that. You're awesome, and I would love to help out.
Yeah.
Mm. Yeah, you don't get that these days, especially on social media with the whole
Really?
Well, you don't see it
You don't see it, yeah.
in the sense of everyone is exposed to everyone's A-grade material all the time, so you don't have that.
Yeah.
You don't have that like friends pushing friends on to do better things, and like I said, it wasn't a clique or a conglomerate or an art collective or whatever. It was a bunch of like friends egging each other on, like
Yeah.
like we can build on this. Like this is how you started out, and this is how we can like progress. How you can improve it, and sort of batting ideas back and forth. And the end product of that is something worth showing to people. But because people don't necessarily have those kinds of how can I put this, like intimate starting connections with other people, it's difficult to build on top of that, because it's all, like I said, you're exposed to everyone's A-grade material all the time.
Yeah.
Like you're following people on Twitter and Instagram for their great art, not their like crappy sketches from 7 years ago.
Entiendio.
On the other hand,
on the other hand, it's not just that. It's the fact that like when you do have like say that small group of friends of yours that is actually egging you on, even the shitty sketches.
Yeah.
That like when it comes to like people who are willing to help one another, it's the shitty sketches that people are like, no ways, this is actually pretty cool. You can turn it into this. You can turn it into that.
Yeah.
We have that ability to just, and I mean, I've seen it in what we have, like a South African art group, for instance.
Awesome.
Like you sit down and you listen to, or you watch it. Granted, yes, it's memes and it's fucking bullshit the entire time. But when somebody posts something that to any other person, you sit down and you're like, okay, well, it's not as good as some of the other stuff that I've seen. You'll always find 5 or 10 or 15 people going like, cool, that's really, really good. Like, maybe do this to change that and to turn this into that. So
yeah,
it's very self-affirming almost. It's the same thing with writing stories. Same thing.
Yeah.
All of this. So, and the furry fandom has that ability to both make and break people at the same time. And sometimes I don't realize, or I don't think people realize the kind of harm and or help they can do by being part of this fandom.
Yes, absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
The impact that an unvarnished opinion can have is huge. Like enthusiasm can build a young person or an insecure person's self-confidence and provide them with motivation that makes them into an absolute superstar eventually, or immediately. I mean, just unlocking their confidence, and by the same token, like someone just being dismissive, not even cruel. I mean, cruelty is its own problem, but just like expressing a meh about something is adding a voice of negativity that can also have a huge effect on people. And yes, the public nature of Twitter So furry FA where public, like yeah, that's certainly a danger. But I do hope, I know that it's true for myself and a lot of my friends, truer throughout the community, that these groups that you're talking about, these peer groups, is what we're talking about, right? Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
young people or more experienced people or whatever, and writers and storytellers, um, that they do exist. But of course, they don't exist on Twitter because Twitter's like a bad medium for that because everyone can look at your nonsense. Yeah, like it used to be IRC channels. Now you've got Telegram group. Oh my God, I love these things because you can. I mean, you can mute them if you're not interested in it, right?
Yeah.
And now you've got folders, so you can. Now you can obligation to, oh, please come and join my channel. Yeah. Okay, well, I don't want to not join your channel and reject you, but okay, I'm not super interested. Whatever. And you can still be in. Okay, so for the Voice of Dog, right? The
Yeah.
podcast that I'm doing right now, I decided it would be fun to make a little saloon for some of the authors that have contributed stories, and they might like to talk to each other because that's, hey, on this topic, I can't believe that I'm just coming to it now. I have loved watching these writers like promote each other's stories and like compliment each other's stories through the podcast, and like waiting for a new episode to come out, and I'm reading a new story, and then they contact that author to compliment them on this cool story that they wrote, or retweet it to their own followers, and I've loved that so much. And I brought that into Telegram. I just made a little group, and anytime that somebody makes a contribution to the podcast, I send them an invitation. If they want to join, they're welcome to. And it's not like about anything, but it's a group of people who have enjoyed contributing stories to share, and especially like uplifting stories, because that's the focus, right?
Yeah.
To give people courage in these dark times. And these are it's incredible to see these communities emerging between people that didn't know each other before, that didn't know what they had in common, and just through access to a particular medium or through a project, they can discover each other and provide that for each other. I've seen like a multiple published author in that channel like provide really detailed editorial advice to a young writer who shared something that they were a little bit unsure about, and that's so cool. This
Yeah.
I've okay. I'm sorry to like keep. No, I'm not sorry. I'm not sorry. There's
No.
a thing that I think is so magical about the furry fan. And there are many magical things about the furry fandom. As Uncle Kage likes to say, that we are fans of each other because we don't have a set canon. It's just hugely powerful. The furry fandom is an economy of appreciation. Like the basic currency with which we trade is our attention, and it is a miraculous currency that grows as it's spent. You have more of it when you give some to someone else. There is more attention and there is more appreciation.
That's true.
And it's necessary for us to value that, because there's not a lot of money, in furry art and furry fiction. For some artists, they've managed to do it, and kudos to them. Writers, musicians, and now with Patreon and Ko-fi, and I think that's how you say it, right? Ko-fi,
Yeah,
coffee. Yeah.
coffee, whatever.
Yeah, it's possible for people to get it, but like that's a for a lot of for in most cases that's going to be like a little trickle, and the
Mm.
biggest reason to keep coming back and to put work into stories and podcasts and interviews is just because you're appreciated for it,
Yeah.
right? That's what you get out of it. That's
Mm.
that's our reward. That's how we're paid for this work that we're doing.
I mean,
If we're going to talk
granted,
about it as transactional, right?
like, yeah, granted, I mean, like, real money would be helpful, especially if you can make a career out of it, which is,
Gosh, yeah.
but
Wouldn't that be nice?
yeah, but I mean, at the end of the day, and it's one of the reasons why, say, for instance, south-afrifur doesn't really, both con as well as radio. If there is any kind of contribution, it goes towards things that would be useful rather than trying to keep ourselves afloat. It's one of the reasons why things don't necessarily come out as often as they could,
We don't
because
monetize anything really.
the
Right.
focus isn't. It's not to. It's not to make money. It's to make sure that voices are heard. That's literally the entire purpose. It's the purpose as to what you're doing as well. Like, you're reading these stories to a
Yeah.
mass audience because it's useful. People can hear it. People have some people who may not even have access to that. That's something that you provide. You provide that kind of access. You provide a voice to it. You provide a medium to someone who have read something the first time around.
Yeah, and it makes me immensely happy to be in a position where I'm able to do that, and and through something that I enjoy. Like, I really enjoy working with furry writers. There's so much fun. I really enjoy working with furry artists. Don't have an art project at the moment. It's a yeah, it's real joy to be able to, stir the pot with the stone soup in it. Um, and give people things like you never feel richer than when you have a lot to share, right?
Yeah.
That's great.
That's wealth,
Huh.
and I feel sad for people who don't feel that way. And I never like to look down on anyone. That's a very poor use of your eyes, casting them down on anyone else. But like, the only people that I feel real, like, regret for are people who don't get this idea, who don't value sharing over having, because it's
Hmm.
isn't that the opposite of community?
Yeah.
Hmm. Definitely. It's like, that's a very like poignant statement.
And then it's just, yeah, it's sad because you don't get to have what we get to have for free. All we have to do is just be cool and the economy of appreciation.
Yeah.
Pay happily from our wealth of, and then think of something cool to do and go and do it. Work at it, and get some friends together, and eventually maybe fail. Hey,
Yeah.
failure's part of it. Sometimes you fail, and then you go and do something else. It's cool.
Yeah. What?
I mean, and
What's that adage? Like, first step at being good to something is sucking at it.
yeah.
Oh, I like that one. Yeah. Everybody's got a, like, you've got a bomb. Actually, this is something that I've thought about a lot as a recovered furry writer. Like, I sort of retired from writing, and in a lot of ways, that was failure. Heathen City was 3 books. It was supposed to be more. There's no more. There's no more books. I never finished it in any way. The story series that it was based on also abandoned that. And I stopped writing, and failure. Yeah. I failed at that, and that's okay.
But you didn't so much as failed as created platforms for other people to start creating their own ideas, when much like when you're looking at, say, Yipstar or anything like that, and starting your career out there.
Yeah.
You went and said, well, I'm not going to, I don't want to send this off to a publisher. I'm just going to do this myself. uh,
Yeah.
you started doing something yourself. People liked it. Other people decided to do the exact same thing that you did, and they in as much as you might think that you may have failed at something, what you also did is that you created and set up a platform that allowed other people courage and the ability to want to do the same.
Oh, if that is indeed the case, then I'll be very proud and happy, because that's how I got started as well.
Hmm.
Like, talking of platforms like Yivstar, that's not a website that has always existed. That's Taumal out in
Yeah.
Austria, and his for decades, and his various compatriots who've worked to keep that, spending their own money to keep those servers online, and doing 2 redesigns, because, let's be fair, the first designs that I provided honestly was not very good, and then just doing it again, and the amount of work is staggering, and the result is as you say, is a platform where people can share and feel appreciated and be inspired by each other. As I was inspired to be a writer by KM Hirosaki and Kyle and Tube and that whole generation, and inspired to do voice acting by Buck Hopper and given a platform for that. Yes, that's what we do. That's why yeah, okay. I never tire of waxing enthusiastic about the furry fandom, because it is miraculous that we just keep doing this. We keep making stuff. And, every little community, every fur meet eventually like becomes a con, to the point where there are just too many to attend or join it. Every stories result in publications and anthologies and readings on YouTube, and we have dancers and people just keep finding ways to contribute. And even if you're not, and again, like, one of the main contributions is appreciation. People don't have to be dancers themselves. Like, you can be a fan. Is such a cool thing to be. Celebrating and sharing and appreciating. I'm a bit of a broken record. Yeah, no, I realize that, but this is how I, and it's why the fandom is very important to me, and why I feel so really really privileged to be able to share that with you and to participate in the project that you're doing here. South-afrifur is amazing. It's really cool.
Well, I've said this on several occasions. We can't do what we do if it wasn't for people like you.
No.
Yeah. Otherwise, it would just be the two of us rambling nonsensically about, I don't know, traffic.
About the weather and traffic.
Yeah, no, I get you now. Like, that's it. Yes, it's like being the first person, just sitting there waiting. It's really nothing to do with it.
Yeah. But and those are the things. Like, positivity is probably it's a self-fulfilling problem.
Yeah, I think so. You know, that kind of attitude of sharing, contribution, and it's liberating to do work for something other than money, or like approval. To be able to do it for the joy of doing that, and to share it with people that you know are going to be into it, even if it's not the best, but it's the best that you did. Like, I sometimes look at my older writings, and like most writers, you sort of you feel an impulse to cringe, because a lot of it's just bad, right? A lot of mistakes that you stopped making, you were still making back then. And your taste has changed. So yeah, objectively you can say, okay, bad. There's mistakes in it, but I know that it was the best that I knew to do. With it was. I know that this story was the best story that I could have written with the knowledge that I had in 2004 in the 6 hours that I spent on it. That's it, and that's reason enough to be proud of.
But yeah,
this is the best interview that I'm doing right now. Right. This is the best sandwich that I've ever eaten right this second.
Yes.
Given the constraints of not being able to go to the shops because lockdown.
Well, there is that. Yeah.
Hey, look, chutney is just another version of jam. I'm just saying.
Oh wow! Shots fired.
Chutney of gladney.
Yeah, that's
What's gladney?
Yeah, gladney.
What? You'd prefer gladney
to
chutney?
No,
I
get it now.
Yeah.
Wait. What is gladney?
Gladney is
like not at all.
Yeah.
It's like chutney or not at all.
Oh, yes, gotcha. Ik snap hem.
Yeah.
No, I'll take chutney. Oh,
chutney's amazing. Chutney is
still awesome. Okay, well, here's allow me to blow your mind. What's the difference between where does soup end and tea begin?
Fuck.
Yeah,
right.
No,
because you think it's easy, right? Yeah. We've talked about soup again. Like, let's define tea and soup. Tea versus soup. Let's do this. Okay, what makes tea? Well, it's the tea plant, right?
Tea leaves, yeah.
Yeah, tea leaves from the tea plant. Rooibos isn't that plant. Rooibos is a different plant.
Yeah.
Yes.
It's not a tea.
Yeah.
You also get fruit and floral teas, which are also not the tea plant.
Exactly. So apparently we're fine with that. Okay, cool. So what is it? Does it have to? Because I encountered this when I had mushroom tea, and that kind of blew my mind. Like, why is it mushroom tea and not mushroom bouillon? Because you're both boiling it,
Yeah.
or like
but
fermented pu'er.
I think to a degree it has to do with what stays in and what's removed.
Yeah.
Because tea, you remove whatever you're using to steep it with. Soup stays in. Mushroom soup, the mushrooms stay in. Like tomatoes, the tomatoes stay in.
Yep. But you take the ham hock out of the erwten soup before you serve it. Like you cook it with a big old bone in there to get the fat and the broth out, and then you take the big old bone out because it's gross.
Yeah, but the broth stays in.
The broth stays in, but in the same way that the tea, like dissolved tea water stays in. But you take the leaves out, you take the bone out. Yeah.
Yeah, you've cooked off all the good stuff.
But it's,
yeah.
Yeah.
For both soup and tea. Okay, I'm sorry. I just pulled the pin on this soup versus tea hand grenade. Oh,
no, but is soup just savory tea?
No.
We're going to be in this until midnight now. I've drunk some savory fucking teas. Pu'er, the Chinese fermented.
Yeah.
Oh, that's some powerful earthy stuff.
That's a weird way to put it down, like earthy.
Look, I don't want to say shit. I don't want to say it's shit tea because it does have a certain bouquet of. So I just say earthy. It's very tasty. Like you're gonna be. I mean, okay. So pu'er, it's fermented tea, and you pour water over it, and you steep it, and then you throw the tea away, and then you pour fresh water over it because now you've just rinsed the tea, and you do this a few times, right? You make several pots of tea, small pots with this same lump of pu'er, and the flavor changes every time. Like it goes from earthy to sort of grassy, and it sort of opens up. It's a real tea adventure.
I'm gonna take your word for it.
Well, should you ever want an education, I can take you to. Let me see where I had my first. Yeah, I had my proper education in pu'er teas. That was in Moscow. It was 2013. I'd been invited to be guest of honor at Rusference, the furry convention out there, and had a friend in Moscow that I was staying with, and he took me to a secret tea house that was hidden inside a tea house that was also a bookshop. But so you go through the tea house into the bookshop, and then through a special door in the bookshop, and that takes you to the real secret tea house. And it's really kind of cool.
So it's like steeping tea.
That sounds like some joints.
Yeah, God.
Sounds like some joints in Cape Town that we visited. Like, didn't we have to go through a clothing shop to get to Macedonia?
Yes.
And it's like some kind of secret speakeasy. That's so cool.
But for tea, which is completely legal. Which is
weird.
But
you want the good stuff, right?
Good tea.
You want the good shit, the earthy shit.
Yeah. None of the dealers outside in the street are like Lapsang Sushang. None of that.
No. That's for that's the decoy tea. Yeah. We use that for profiling purposes.
It's the pleb tea.
Anyway.
Yeah, exactly.
I think we're. This is a place. I think this is actually an bombshell.
And that bombshell, yeah.
Yeah.
Yes. So, homework for everyone listening: discuss until you die. What is the difference and similarity, and let us know. Guys, this has been a lot of fun. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you for joining us. We're definitely gonna pull on your tail again at some point.
Yeah, definitely.
About some more more of your. We'll do a more pointed one if you have like any projects that are coming up soon that we can talk about more specifically.
Oh, awesome! I'd love to.
But obviously, if you want to plug you at this point.
If there's anything you wanna
oh God,
to the audience, is there any? Obviously, we're plugging the Voice of Dog.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, thank you. That's the voice dot dog. I got a very good internet address for that one. The voice dot dog is and also a call to any writers out there who've been listening along. That obviously reading a story every day is a punishing schedule, so I'm very interested in uplifting stories of any genre, can be adult as well, up to about 5,000 words. So you can get in touch with me. I'm at Khaki Doggy on Twitter. I'm very excited to meet new people, so please do say hello. I've got my photography on Flickr that's linked in my my Twitter bio as well. Let me see. I do another podcast that's not as furry, where we pretend to review books we haven't read based on the cover, and we sort of make up what it is as it goes along.
Nice.
That's called Cover My Ass Cast. Yeah, right. That's a lot of fun. Sadly, no upcoming like con attendances because everything's cancelled. But we'll see how that
Yeah.
goes.
Speaking
Other
of,
than that, like,
sorry, no, go ahead, finish up. I want to say something completely off tangent.
oh, my last thing was going to be, trans rights, support each other, be cool.
Also, stay safe, stay indoors, wash your beans, all that cool shit.
Oh yeah, exactly. Wash them, clean them beans, and and maybe like pick up a phone and like call or text or message someone that you haven't spoken to in a while. Just see how they're doing, because we need each other right now.
Yeah, shit's weird.
Yeah, it's going to be better, and we're going to take good care of each other. We're staying home to protect the vulnerable folks, and we should be proud of ourselves for that. Hang in there.
Right. And just for those of you who are 5-10 minutes, I'll be on the air again. I'm playing some music for until midnight, so for the next 2 hours. I'm going to be playing some more metal and whatever else I decide to play at that point. It's actually also almost past 10, which is awesome, because then we get to play the interesting music.
Oh, not the pleb music. You get the earthy music.
The very earthy music.
The puer music.
Can't wait.
Yeah.
See you about 10, yeah?
Yeah. Khaki, once again, thank you so much for coming on, and we shall see you guys again next week.
Yes.
Peace.
Cheers, everybody. Stay safe.